Well, hi everybody. This is Karen Legitimacy from New England Dyslexia Solutions here in Amesbury, Massachusetts. And today's topic will be about coping mechanisms and how they can affect the learning cycle, particularly with students with dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, and other related learning difficulties. So before we get started, let's just talk about the word coping in general. And so what that kind of means to me is that, yes, you are coping, you're surviving. It's almost like you're hanging on, but you're keeping your head afloat. So, you know, you're okay. But coping is very different from thriving. And so it's really on two totally different levels. When you're coping, you're kind of maneuvering around and through things. When you're thriving, you're truly understanding and you're really participating. So if we talk about what it feels like for someone with dyslexia, someone with ADD, someone who is struggling with learning issues in the classroom, it can be very scary. The classroom can be overwhelming, it can be isolating, there can be lots of different distractions, lots of things coming at you, and very quickly in the process of getting an education, you can start to feel like you're kind of sinking, and that the peers in your classroom are all seemingly getting it, and you're not. And people just really, everybody wants to be accepted, everyone wants to feel the same as everybody else. And when you're dyslexic, that just happens very early on in life, where you start to feel very different. And you can be very disoriented and very confused a lot of the time in class. So what happens is that you need to be able to come up with some coping strategies or some coping mechanisms that will help you to get through this nightmare sometimes. So if you think of an analogy of having a life raft, and you're out on, by yourself in this ocean, and there are waves coming at you, and you're disoriented and you're scared, and you find this life raft, and you just grab onto that with all of your might, and you just use it as your sink or swim. You're going to be holding on to this thing to save your life. And so with the coping mechanisms that need to be established when you're dyslexic and in the classroom, it's kind of a similar thing, where you might have an experience early on. And let's just start off with the positive side of things. So you might have an experience early on as, maybe you did a hands-on project where you built this volcano, and you were able to see all the inside workings of the volcano, and you were really able to understand what you were learning about. And at the end of that experience, you say, oh my goodness, I learned that. I really did a great job, and I retained it, and I understood it. So hopefully those kinds of situations are happening along the way, but they don't always. And on the negative side of things, if you have a coping mechanism that has worked once, you can tend to hold on to that and keep repeating it over and over and over again until it becomes really rooted in your person, and it's hard to break those once they really start to take root. So when that happens in the learning cycle, what it can do is it can block alternative learning from actually taking place. So I want to give you a couple of examples, and one of them is extremely common with a lot of my clients, and that is just the simple act of singing the alphabet song. So this is something that, from the age of 2 or maybe even younger, children are being exposed to the alphabet song. And, a lot of kids will just, learn the song, and it's kind of integrated. But for someone who has trouble with letters and words and things like that, the alphabet song can be the only way that they're going to be able to know the sequence of the alphabet. So I see this a lot when we're working with letters with my clients, where they'll be, looking at the letters, and they get to the L, and it's like L-M-N-O, And there's this realization that happens like, oh, wait a second, L, M, N, O, oh, they're all separate letters. Or a lot of times there's confusion, and then maybe there's, oh, where's the N in between the Y and Z? Because they've been singing that song so many times, Y and Z. So really what it boils down to is that they don't really know the alphabet, they know the song. And so there isn't that full mastery of the alphabet. And this can even translate later on in life with, so you're an adult and you're having to file something and you have to sing the alphabet song every time. You need to figure out, okay, where's the P, and then the next letter and the next letter. Every time you have to start over and sing the song. So that's a relatively common one. And there are hundreds and hundreds of coping mechanisms that can take place for any individual through their lifespan. Another really common one is having tricks and little, creative ways to remember how to spell things or to learn a process of some kind. So, like the only way that you're going to be able to remember how to spell receive is that, I receive a Reese's peanut butter cup, and Reese, R-E-C-E. So anyway, just little things like that where they can build up. And if you have hundreds of those different tricks, then you're always having to remember a trick, and it can be very confusing. And I'll share a story in a little bit about that and how that works. If you have to use your hands, or the bed trick to remember which way the B and the D goes, then that isn't fully mastered. The B and the D can be very confusing, but really what we want is for a child to be able to look at a lowercase b and recognize it as a B, not a backwards D. So there are all kinds of little techniques that can go on that are coping strategies, but then there are also behaviors that can start to take place that are also coping behaviors. So dependence is a big one. A lot of kids will, just become very dependent on their parents to, help them with their homework. And I know in my situation, I would always have to be there for my son as he was doing his homework. And if I had to get up and check the pasta and then come back, he wouldn't have done anything. So he was very, very reliant on my help to be able to get through his homework. Avoidance is a big one. Rote memorization is actually a very damaging coping mechanism because there's no meaning behind it. So if you're rote memorizing something and you don't understand what it means or why it's even important, that information is just going to leave you the moment it's not necessary in the learning process. And other behaviors would be things like being the class clown. So maybe very early on in a child's development, they get into a situation where, oh, I'm going to be asked to read something in front of the class, and they start to act out. And what happens is that they get sent to the principal's office. And so, they're kind of marked in that spot saying, that was interesting. So there was something that I really didn't feel good about, and I just, started acting out, and I got to leave. I didn't have to do it. So there is a point where it somehow registers, but then what can happen is that can become, done over and over and over again until the point that then if they're ever in a tricky situation, that kind of triggers, and it's either, a behavior that could be disruptive or, someone that's always making jokes or whatever. So, being the class clown can be a behavior that can be a coping strategy as well. There can also be, some people who do the opposite, where they just go inward. They just go quiet. So, well, if I don't say anything, if I don't raise my hand, if I don't make eye contact, nobody ever calls on me, and I won't have to risk being embarrassed or, having to say something and not be right. Another coping strategy could be drugs and alcohol. So I'm not stupid, I'm just high, There's a lot of self-esteem that needs to be covered up, actually, as a dyslexic, because nobody ever wants to feel like they're not smart. And It's sometimes hard not to. Dyslexia and intelligence, not related. So typically, people with dyslexia actually have a higher than normal intelligence. But it's hard not to feel that way, because when you're in a school system or in a situation where, you know, you're looking at the child next to you or the, you know, on either side, and they get it. So why am I not getting it? There must be something wrong with me. It can be really challenging. So these coping mechanisms are something that are building up over time. But what can happen is that they're layered, and they're just layered and layered and layered, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these coping mechanisms that are all kind of preventing you from being able to experience, you know, learning the way the average person does. So that doesn't have to be the case, though. So basically, one of the things that we focus on at New England Dyslexia Solutions is really getting to the idea that we need to fully understand something so that we can master it. And once there's that understanding there, we can start letting go of all of these coping mechanisms. So I want to give you an example. I worked with a gentleman who was an amazing and brilliant businessman. And when he first called me, he said, "Oh, well, I was diagnosed as dyslexic when I was a little kid, and I've done well for myself, and I have my own business, but and you know, my reading's fine, my spelling is fine, but where I'm really still struggling is with my writing." And he said, "You know, I get so frustrated, and I just can never get my ideas out. I have these great ideas, and I just can never get them out." So when I was working with him, one of the things that we discovered was that he thought he was a really good speller, but in reality, he had all of the tricks and ways to remember how to spell words. And one of the examples that he gave me that just sticks out was that whenever he had to spell the word where, he had this little mental process that he would go through. So he would say, okay, so the word where, I know it's a place, and Hawaii is a place, and Hawaii has an H. It starts with an H. And so I know that the word where has an H in it. And he had all kinds of these different tricks and ways to remember things. And so basically, I just, you know, sat back and I asked him, I said, you know, if you have this great idea, and every time you want to write the word where, or you want to write all these other words, and you have to go all the way to Hawaii and back just to know how to spell the word where, can you see how disruptive that is to the process? Your whole thinking process is challenged. And of course, he completely agreed. And then we started working on ways where he could actually, I got that little thing here. So where he could actually master those words. And so as he would master the word where, he could then let go of that compulsive solution, that life raft could go. And then, you know, as he kept doing these words and even letters that were confusing him, they slowly were able to release all of these compulsive solutions. So, and let me say this too, is that once all of the words, or a lot of the words were starting to release, where he was not having to think so hard and use those tricks, it actually freed up so many resources so that then he could write more freely, and he could get his thoughts down more easily. His frustration level went down, his stress level went down. His avoidance tactics, where he said I would just, you know, say procrastinate with writing all the time, so those let go. So ultimately, there are ways that you can end up being able to release those compulsive solutions when you have the right tools and you have the right guidance and you know how you think and how you learn. So I hope that this has been helpful. Just as in the last case, so I did a live thing on Monday, and I couldn't read any of the comments, and it looks like many of you have joined, and I'm seeing some comments come through, and I really apologize, I just can't see them. So if you have questions, or if you want any follow-up, I am happy to do that. I will answer any questions that you have after this is over in the comments section. So I look forward to hosting more of these live events, and Take care, and I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.